The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with the usual arguments. Representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in their assigned seats, debating trade routes and border disputes. The Zephyrians spoke in their crystal-clear voices about logic and order. The Kruvan delegates banged their armored fists on tables, demanding more military funding. The ethereals floated silently, their minds touching others without permission. In the back corner, the human section sat nearly empty. Ambassador Elena Vasquez looked around the small area reserved for her species. Just 3 months ago, 12 human representatives had filled these seats. Now only she remained. The other council members had not even noticed. Elena remembered when humanity first joined the council 50 years ago. They had been so excited, so hopeful. Finally, they would take their place among the great civilizations of the galaxy. They would share their knowledge, learn from others, and build a better future together. How wrong they had been. The Kruvan Empire used human soldiers as cannon fodder in their endless wars. They called humans expendable but enthusiastic in their military reports. Human colonies were stripped of rare minerals to fuel Zephyrian computers. The Nexari took human inventions, improved them slightly, and claimed them as their own creations. When humans complained, they were told to be grateful. "You are a young species," the council members would say. "Learn your place." Elena had watched it happen slowly. First, Ambassador Chen from New Shanghai stopped coming to meetings. His aide said he was sick, but Elena knew better. Then Ambassador Rodriguez from Mars Colony disappeared entirely. One by one, the human representatives found excuses to leave. Pattern was not limited to the council chambers. Across the galaxy, human settlements were going dark. Not destroyed, just empty. Human trading ships stopped arriving at alien ports. Human research stations in distant sectors shut down their communication arrays. "Where are they going?" Elena had asked Director Harrison during their last encrypted conversation. "Away," Harrison had replied. Far away from here. Elena understood now. Humanity was leaving. Not just the council, but the entire galactic community. They were pulling back to places where no alien eyes could find them. The Kruvan General Thax noticed the empty, human section first. "Where are your people, human?" he growled during a break in the session. "They have other duties," Elena replied calmly. "What duties could be more important than serving the council?" asked Zephyrian Prime Logic Executor Vex 12. His crystal body sparkled with annoyance. Elena did not answer. She had learned that explanations were useless with these beings. They saw only what they wanted to see. The truth was simple but terrible. Humanity had discovered something in the old ruins scattered across dead worlds. Ancient warnings written in languages that predated any current civilization. Warnings about something that slept in the dark spaces between stars. Dr. Sarah Chen, humanity's greatest archaeologist, had spent 20 years translating the fragments. The message was always the same. When unity becomes rigid, the void awakens. When order becomes absolute, death follows. Only chaos survives the harvest. Humanity had tried to share this discovery with the Council. They had presented evidence, shown the translations, explained the danger. The response had been swift and brutal. "Human imagination," the ethereals had declared. "Your species sees threats everywhere because you are naturally paranoid." "Ancient nonsense," the Nexari had said. "If such a threat existed, our superior technology would have detected it." The Kruvan had been more direct. Cowards invent monsters to excuse their weakness. So humanity had stopped talking and started preparing. Elena's communicator buzzed softly. The message was simple. "It is time." She stood up from her seat and walked to the center of the council chamber. The debate stopped as hundreds of alien eyes turned toward her. Some looked annoyed at the interruption. Others seemed barely aware she existed. "I have a message from the human government," Elena announced. Her voice carried clearly through the vast space. Zephyrian Prime Logic Executor Vex 12 activated his translation matrix. "Speak quickly, human. We have important matters to discuss," Elena smiled sadly. Even now they could not see what was happening. Humanity wishes to inform the Galactic Council that we are withdrawing from all galactic affairs, effective immediately. The chamber erupted in confusion. Some delegates laughed. Others looked puzzled. A few seemed angry. "You cannot simply leave," declared ethereal mind speaker Ithara. "The Council has invested resources in your development." "And we are grateful," Elena replied. "But humanity has chosen a different path." "What path?" demanded General Thax. "Where do you think you can go? This council rules the galaxy." Elena's smile grew wider. "The galaxy is larger than you think, General. And humanity has always been good at finding new places to call home." She activated her personal recording device and spoke clearly. "We came in peace. We offered friendship. We were met with exploitation and contempt. Humanity withdraws from galactic affairs. What follows is not our responsibility." The message would be broadcast to every human settlement, every human ship, every human colony. It was the signal they had all been waiting for. "This is foolishness," said Nexari High Coordinator Zil-3. "Your species is too primitive to survive without council protection." "Perhaps," Elena agreed. "But we prefer to face our own struggles rather than serve as tools for others." She began, walking toward the exit. Behind her, the council members called out threats and demands. They spoke of sanctions, of military action, of teaching humanity its place. Elena did not look back. By the time the council finished their angry speeches, every human world would be empty. The evacuation had been planned for months. Ships hidden in asteroid fields and dark nebulae. New colonies established in regions no alien species had ever explored. As she reached the chamber doors, Elena turned one final time. "You are great civilizations," she said. "You have built wonders, conquered stars, achieved things humanity may never match. But you have forgotten something important." "What?" asked Mind Speaker Ithara, her mental voice carrying genuine curiosity. "You have forgotten how to adapt," Elena replied. "How to change when change is needed. How to survive when survival requires giving up everything you think makes you strong." The doors closed behind her with a soft hiss. Elena walked through corridors she would never see again, past aliens who were already forgetting she existed. Outside the council building, her ship waited. It was a small, unremarkable vessel that had been designed to avoid attention. As Elena climbed aboard, she looked up at the towering spires of the galactic capital. Soon, this place would face a test it could not pass. The ancient enemy would wake up, as it had countless times before. But this time would be different. This time, humanity would be ready. Elena's ship lifted off silently and disappeared into the star-filled darkness. Behind her, the great civilizations of the galaxy continued their debates, completely unaware that their protectors had just abandoned them to their fate. In the depths of space, human ships gathered in hidden fleets. They carried not just people, but knowledge. Secrets gathered from ruins that the aliens had ignored. Technologies developed in hidden laboratories, and most importantly, allies that the Council had never imagined could exist. The silent exodus was complete. Now the real work could begin. 3 months after the humans disappeared, General Thax stood in his command center watching his empire fall apart. The massive holographic display showed red warning lights across dozens of star systems. Supply lines that had worked perfectly for decades were broken. Weapons that never failed were malfunctioning. Ships that should have been invincible were limping back to port with mysterious damage. "Report," Thax growled at his aide. "The 7th Fleet is stranded in the Outer Rim," the aide replied nervously. "Their supply convoy never arrived. The automated depot says it delivered the supplies, but the ships are empty." Thax's massive fist crushed the arm of his command chair. "How is that possible?" "We don't know, sir. The depot systems show green across all functions, but when our ships dock for refueling, the tanks are dry." This was happening everywhere. Proven military logistics had always been a marvel of efficiency. Thousands of automated systems worked together to keep their fleets supplied across the galaxy. The systems had been designed by the greatest Kruven engineers and maintained by maintained by humans. For 30 years, human technicians had worked on Kruven supply systems. The Kruven had thought themselves generous for giving jobs to such a primitive species. The humans had smiled and worked quietly, making small improvements that no one noticed. Now Thax realized the truth. The humans had not been maintaining the systems, they had been running them. Without human oversight, the automated networks were revealing their hidden flaws. Across the galaxy, similar disasters were unfolding. In the crystal cities of Zephyr, Prime Logic Executor, Vex 12 stared at error messages that should not exist. The great computational matrices that ran Zephyrian civilization were experiencing cascading failures. Simple calculations were producing impossible results. Data that had been stored safely for centuries was corrupting randomly. Initiate backup protocols, Vex 12 commanded. Backup protocols are non-functional, his assistant reported. The error-checking subroutines are themselves generating errors. Vex 12's crystal body flickered with confusion. Zephyrian computer systems were supposed to be perfect. They operated on pure logic, free from the emotional chaos that plagued other species. How could pure logic fail? The answer came from an old archived file that Vex 12 found buried in the system logs. A report from a human programmer named Jackson, filed 5 years earlier. The Zephyrian logical matrices are impressive but brittle. They assume that all problems can be solved through linear reasoning. When faced with paradoxes or recursive loops, they freeze. I have installed several intuitive patches that bypass logical dead ends using pattern recognition. These patches require regular updates based on experience rather than programming. Vex 12 understood now. The human patches had not been simple code fixes. They had been living solutions that adapted and learned. Without humans to update them, they were slowly breaking down. But the humans had been doing more than just maintaining alien technology. They had been thinking in ways that other species could not. On Nexari Prime, High Coordinator Zil 3 faced his own crisis. The Nexari had always prided themselves on their advanced research capabilities. Their laboratories had produced the galaxy's most sophisticated technologies for thousands of years. But now their greatest projects were stalling. What is the status of the quantum tunneling drive? Zil 3 asked his research team. Stuck, sir, the lead scientist replied. We have hit a theoretical wall. The mathematics work perfectly, but the practical implementation fails every time. Then run more simulations. We have run 17 million simulations. They all show the same result. The drive should work, but it does not. Zil 3 reviewed the project files. For the past decade, whenever Nexari research hit such walls, they had consulted with human scientists. The humans had a strange way of approaching problems. They would ignore the mathematics sometimes and try things that made no logical sense. Often, these irrational experiments led to breakthrough discoveries. The Nexari had thought they were teaching the humans about proper scientific method. In reality, the humans had been solving problems that Nexari logic could not handle. Dr. Sarah Chen's research notes, discovered in an abandoned human facility, explained it simply. Nexari intelligence is like a very powerful microscope. It can see details that others miss, but it cannot step back to see the big picture. Sometimes the solution to a problem requires ignoring the details and looking at the whole. Without human insight, Nexari research was grinding to a halt. The crisis spread beyond technology and science. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for centuries began experiencing mysterious disruptions. Pirate attacks that had been rare became common. Neutral zones that had been peaceful for decades erupted into conflict. Captain Velara of the Galactic Trade Commission discovered the reason during a routine inspection of shipping records. Human ships had been everywhere, carrying small cargoes that seemed unimportant. Medical supplies to remote colonies, communication equipment to mining stations, cultural artifacts to research outposts. They were not just trading goods, Velara realized. They were maintaining relationships. Human traders had been the galaxy's unofficial diplomats. They talked to everyone, listened to complaints, carried messages between enemies. When disputes arose, human negotiators would appear with creative solutions that satisfied no one completely, but allowed everyone to save face. Without human mediation, old grudges were surfacing. Species that had been forced to cooperate by council decree were remembering why they had hated each other in the first place. But the most disturbing reports came from the galaxy's outer rim. Survey ships sent to check on remote systems were finding empty space where worlds should be. Not destroyed worlds, missing worlds, as if entire star systems had simply vanished. Mind speaker Ithara of the Ethereals was the first to sense the deeper problem. During a meditation session, her consciousness touched something vast and cold moving in the spaces between stars. It was ancient beyond measure and hungry beyond imagining. "Something is coming," she announced to an emergency council session. "Something that feeds on order and grows stronger with each conquest." The council members looked at her with skepticism. "Your species is known for dramatic predictions," said General Thax.
"Ethereal mysticism is not reliable intelligence." "This is not mysticism," Ithara insisted. "I can feel it approaching, a darkness that consumes civilizations. It moves toward us from the galaxy's edge." Logic Executor Vex 12 accessed historical
databases. There are no records of such threats in Galactic Council archives. Because the Council archives only go back 3,000 years, Ithara replied. This threat is much older. High Coordinator Zil 3 ran probability calculations. Even if such an entity existed, our combined fleets would be sufficient to handle any invasion. But their combined fleets were no longer functioning properly. Proven, ships could not maintain supplies. Zephyrian tactical computers were producing flawed battle plans. Nexari weapons were failing mysterious tests. As the Council argued, the reports from the outer rim grew worse. Entire sectors were going dark. The few ships that escaped carried stories of impossible enemies and weapons that defied understanding. Captain Velara brought the most disturbing news of all. "We sent a probe to investigate the human evacuation routes," she reported. "We found something the humans left behind." She activated a holographic display showing an ancient chamber carved from black stone. Strange symbols covered the walls, and in the center sat a simple message written in standard galactic script. Warning: the Void Collective awakens every 4 million years to harvest advanced civilizations. Last awakening, 4.2 million years ago. Next awakening, imminent. The galaxy has approximately 6 months before total conquest. Humanity has gone to prepare. Follow at your own risk. The council chamber fell silent. Finally, General Thax spoke. "This could be human deception, a trick to make us panic." "To what purpose?" asked Ithara. "They have already left. What would they gain from lies?" Logic Executor Vex 12 processed the probabilities. If the humans were correct about this threat, their departure makes sense. If they were incorrect, their departure still makes sense given our treatment of their species. High Coordinator Zil 3 reached the obvious conclusion. "We need to contact the humans. They may have information that could save us." The Council authorized immediate attempts to reach human settlements. Ships were dispatched to every known human colony. Emergency broadcasts were sent on all frequencies. The response was silence. Complete absolute silence. Every human world was empty. Every human ship was gone. 12 billion people had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only empty cities and cryptic warnings about an ancient enemy that was already destroying worlds at the galaxy's edge. The great civilizations of the galaxy finally understood that they were alone, facing a threat they did not understand, with systems that were failing because they had never learned to function without human support. The unraveling had begun. The first real contact came from the outer spiral, where the galaxy's edge met the cold emptiness of intergalactic space. Scout Captain Krell of the Nexari had been investigating the disappearing star systems when his ship detected something impossible. "Coordinator," Krell transmitted back to Nexari Prime. "I'm reading massive energy signatures, but they don't match any known technology. The readings are wrong somehow." High Coordinator Zil 3 reviewed the data streaming from Krell's ship. The energy patterns defied known physics. They seemed to bend space around themselves, creating ripples in reality that hurt to look at directly. "Captain, maintain safe distance and continue observation," Zil-3 ordered. "Sir, something is emerging from the distortion." Krell's last transmission was a scream of pure terror before his signal cut to static. 6 hours later, the Nexari lost contact with the entire outer spiral sector. 17 inhabited worlds, 3 major shipyards, and countless smaller installations simply stopped transmitting. The pattern repeated across the galaxy's edge. Ethereal meditation stations reported sensing an approaching wrongness before falling silent. Proven border fortresses sent brief reports of impossible geometries before their signals died. Zephyrian research outposts transmitted corrupted data that crashed computer systems trying to analyze it. Mind Speaker Withara called for an emergency session of the Galactic Council. When the members assembled, her usual calm composure was gone. Her ethereal form flickered with barely controlled fear. "It has begun," she announced. "The harvest that the humans warned us about." General Thax's armor clanked as he shifted impatiently. "Show us proof, not mystical visions." Ythara activated the central holographic display. The galaxy map appeared, showing thousands of star systems in various colors. Over the past week, systems at the edge had been turning black one by one. "This is the Void Collective," Ythara explained. "An entity that has existed since before our civilizations arose. It sleeps in the darkness between galaxies, waking periodically to consume all advanced life." Logic Executor Vex 12 processed the available data. Historical records show no evidence of such an entity. "Because it erases the civilizations it consumes," Ythara replied. "But humans found fragments in ancient ruins that our species ignored. They pieced together the truth." High Coordinator Zil-3 brought up archaeological databases. "The humans did request access to restricted dig sites on dead worlds. We assumed they were looking for primitive artifacts. They were looking for warnings left by previous victims," Ythara said. "The collective operates in cycles. Every few million years it awakens when galactic civilization reaches a certain level of advancement." The holographic display shifted to show ancient text fragments that human archaeologists had translated. "The hunger comes from beyond the rim. It feeds on unity, grows stronger from order. The more organized we become, the easier we are to consume. It learns from each mind it devours, becoming more intelligent with every conquest." "How do we fight it?" asked General Thax. "Previous civilizations tried everything," Ythara continued. "Superior weapons, unified fleets, technological advances, all failed. The collective adapts to any organized resistance." "Then how was it stopped before?" Zil-3 inquired. "The records are incomplete, but the fragments suggest it wasn't defeated through force. Something else drove it back into hibernation." Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the council chambers. A Kruvan communications officer rushed in with urgent reports. "Generals, we've lost contact with the Third Fleet. They were investigating the Kethara sector. Last transmission reported contact with unknown vessels." "What did they see?" Thax demanded. "Ships, sir, but not like anything in our databases. The description doesn't make sense. Vessels that seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons that fire backwards through time. Hull materials that appear to be made from compressed space itself." More reports flooded in over the following hours. The Void Collective was not just destroying worlds, it was transforming them. Entire populations were being absorbed into a single vast consciousness. Their knowledge, their technology, their very essence became part of the collective's growing intelligence. Zephyrian Logic Executor Vex 12 attempted to establish communication with the entity. His most powerful transmission arrays sent greetings in every known language and mathematical concept. The response came as corrupted data that overwrote Vex 12's consciousness. When he recovered 3 days later, his crystal body had changed. Dark veins ran through the clear material, and his voice carried harmonics that should not exist. "I have seen what approaches," Vex 12 announced in a voice that was his own, but somehow more. "The collective remembers this galaxy. It has harvested here before, many times. Each cycle, it learns more about how to consume us efficiently. The other council members backed away from him. Something was wrong with Vex 12's presence, as if reality bent slightly around him. The last harvest was 4.2 million years ago, he continued. That time, 99.7% of all advanced life was consumed before something unprecedented happened. The collective encountered a form of resistance it could not process or adapt to. What kind of resistance? Ithara asked, though her mental shields were raised against Vex 12's altered presence. Chaos, Vex 12 replied. Pure, undiluted chaos. Strategies that made no sense. Technologies that should not work. Cooperation between species that had nothing in common. The collective's intelligence is vast, but it operates on predictable patterns. When faced with true randomness, it becomes confused. General Thax's military mind grasped the implications immediately. Random tactics? That's not a strategy, that's suicide. For organized minds, yes, Vex 12 agreed. But humans understand chaos. They create it instinctively. While we sought to impose order on the galaxy, they remained essentially unpredictable. The council members exchanged glances. Each was remembering their interactions with humans, the strange decisions, the emotional responses, the solutions that worked despite making no logical sense. Are you suggesting that human chaos could resist this entity? Zil 3 asked. The humans didn't just study the ancient warnings, Vex 12 replied. They recognized themselves in the fragments that described the last successful resistance, a species that fought the collective not with superior force but with beautiful, incomprehensible disorder. As if summoned by their discussion, new reports arrived from the front lines. Galactic Defense Force ships were making contact with collective vessels, and the results were catastrophic. Every conventional attack was anticipated and countered. Every tactical formation was predicted and defeated. The collective was not just fighting them, it was learning from them in real time. Admiral Senth of the combined fleet sent his final transmission as his flagship was being consumed. It's in our computers now. It knows our strategies before we implement them. Conventional warfare is useless. We need something it cannot predict. The collective's advance accelerated. Entire sectors fell in days rather than weeks. The entity's ships, if they could be called ships, moved through space in ways that violated known physics. They appeared in multiple locations simultaneously, fired weapons that seemed to exist before the targets were chosen, and consumed matter at the quantum level. Mindspeaker Withara attempted to rally the galaxy's psychic defenses, linking ethereal minds across dozens of worlds. The result was worse than failure. The collective infected the psychic network, using it to spread its influence directly into the defender's consciousness. It's turning our strengths against us, Ithara reported. After barely escaping the corrupted network, our unity makes us vulnerable. Our organization makes us predictable. Everything that made us great civilizations is now helping it destroy us. Logic. Executor Vex 12, his consciousness now partially merged with collective intelligence, made the final assessment. We have perhaps 6 weeks before the collective reaches the galaxy's core worlds. Our combined fleets cannot stop it. Our technologies are inadequate. Our strategies are obsolete. What about the humans? General Thax asked desperately. You said they went to prepare. Where did they go? Vex 12's altered presence flickered with something that might have been hope. They went beyond the galaxy's edge to the spaces where light does not reach. But they were not alone. The ancient records speak of others who survived previous harvests by refusing to be harvested. Refugees from a dozen dead civilizations, hiding in the places between stars. Can we contact them? Zil 3 inquired. We can try, Vex 12 replied. But we would be asking for help from beings whose entire existence is built around avoiding detection, and we would be asking them to fight an enemy they have been hiding from for millions of years. The council chamber fell silent as the weight of their situation settled over them. Outside, the greatest civilizations in galactic history were crumbling before an enemy they could not understand or resist. Their only hope lay with the species they had dismissed as primitive and the mysterious allies that humanity had somehow found in the darkness. The ancient enemy had returned, and the galaxy was learning too late that survival sometimes required abandoning everything that seemed to make you strong. Captain Thelnara of the Ethereals had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. While the Void Collective consumed star systems across the galaxy's rim, she led a small task force into the void, where humanity had vanished. Her ship, the Mind's Eye, carried representatives from each council species. They had nothing left to lose. In 6 weeks, maybe less, the collective would reach the galactic core. Every conventional defense had failed. Every weapon had proven useless. Their only hope was finding the humans and learning how they planned to fight chaos with chaos. Any sign of human activity? Thelnara asked her sensor operator. Nothing on conventional scanners, Lieutenant Korvex replied. But there are gravitational anomalies throughout this region, as if large masses passed through here recently. The task force had been following the trail for 2 weeks. Human evacuation. Routes had been carefully hidden, but not perfectly. Quantum signatures lingered in hyperspace. Waste heat patterns marked where massive fleets had gathered. Most telling were the supply caches, hidden depots containing food, fuel, and medical supplies clearly intended for a journey into deep space. Dr. Kellen Yost, the expedition's human expert, studied the pattern of cache locations. They were planning this for years, he concluded, maybe decades. This wasn't a panicked evacuation, it was a carefully orchestrated exodus. Where were they going? Asked Commander Zix of the Nexari. Away from anything we might find, Yost replied. Look at the trajectory. They avoided all established shipping lanes, all charted systems, all regions where council species have any presence. Mind Speaker Yathara extended her consciousness into the void around them. There is something else, she reported. Echoes of non-human thoughts. The humans were not traveling alone. The first real clue came from a derelict space station orbiting a dead star. The structure was clearly human in design, but it had been stripped of all valuable equipment. Only basic life support remained, along with a single computer terminal that activated when they approached. Dr. Sarah Chen's face appeared on the screen, her image clearly recorded months earlier. If you're watching this, the harvest has begun. You ignored our warnings, dismissed our research, and treated us as expendable. But humans don't abandon people to die, even people who have wronged us. The recording paused, and Chen's expression grew sadder. We tried to save you by staying and fighting together. You made that impossible, so we're saving you another way. The image shifted to show star charts marking human evacuation routes, but these weren't the paths the task force had been following. These led deeper into the galactic void, toward regions that appeared empty on every known map. The Void Collective feeds on predictable civilizations, Chen continued. It adapts to organized resistance, but we found something it cannot adapt to. Beings who survived previous harvests by refusing to be predictable. New images appeared. Strange ships unlike anything in council databases. Cities built from materials that seemed to shift and flow. Creatures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We call them the Chaos Remnants, Chen explained. Survivors from dozens of civilizations that the collective consumed over millions of years. They didn't escape by being stronger or smarter. They escaped by becoming something the collective cannot understand. The recording continued with coordinates and recognition codes. Follow these markers if you want to live. But understand, you cannot bring your old ways of thinking with you. Order is death. Predictability is surrender. To fight the collective, you must become chaos. Commander Zix studied the coordinates. These lead to the Terminus Nebula. Our charts show it as completely uninhabitable. Our charts are wrong, Thelnara realized. They show what we expected to find, not what actually exists. The task force changed course, following Chen's coordinates into regions of space that should have been impossible to navigate. The nebula's radiation should have disabled their ships. The gravitational anomalies should have torn them apart. But human modifications to their navigation systems, modifications they had never noticed before, guided them safely through. What they found defied every understanding of physics and civilization. The hidden fleet was vast beyond imagination. Ships from hundreds of different species, but none matching any known design. Vessels that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially somewhere else. Cities built inside asteroids that were bigger on the inside than the outside. Space stations that moved without engines, following paths that curved through. Dimensions Council science had never discovered. At the center of this impossible armada was a human command ship. But the humans who greeted the task force were not the same people who had left the galaxy months earlier. Admiral Marcus Webb had been changed by whatever process the Chaos remnants used to survive. His uniform was a patchwork of materials from a dozen different species. His left arm had been replaced with technology that seemed to be part machine, part plant, and part something that shifted too quickly to identify. "Welcome to the real galaxy," Webb said as the Council representative stood in his command center. "The one that exists in the spaces between your nice, orderly star charts." The command center itself was a miracle of controlled chaos. Crew members, from species the Council had never seen, worked alongside humans, whose bodies had been modified with alien technology. Computers ran on principles that seemed to contradict basic logic, but somehow produced more accurate results than Nexari systems. "How is this possible?" Commander Zix asked, his analytical mind struggling with what he was seeing. "When you stop insisting that the universe follow your rules, you discover that it has much more interesting rules of its own," Webb replied. "The Chaos remnants taught us that survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It's about being the most adaptable." Dr. Yass studied the mixed crew. "These other species, they're refugees from previous collective harvests?" "Some of them," Webb confirmed. "Others are natives of regions your people never explored because they didn't match your assumptions about how space should work. The Tiu galaxy is much stranger and more wonderful than the Council ever imagined." Mind Speaker Yathara attempted to read the thoughts of the modified humans, but encountered something unprecedented. Their minds operated on multiple levels simultaneously, thinking in patterns that seemed random but achieved results that linear logic could not match. "You've changed yourselves," she observed. "This isn't just technology. You've altered your thought processes. We've learned to think like the universe actually works instead of how we want it to work," Webb explained. "Chaos isn't the absence of order. It's a higher form of order that includes randomness as a fundamental component." Captain Thelnara brought up the urgent question, "Can you stop the collective?" Webb's expression grew serious. "We can try, but success will require more than just fighting. It will require the galaxy's surviving civilizations to abandon everything they think they know about how things should work." He activated a holographic display showing the collective's advance. The entity had consumed nearly a quarter of the galaxy in just 3 weeks. "The collective is incredibly intelligent, but its intelligence is based on pattern recognition and adaptation," Webb continued. "It studies its enemies, learns their strengths and weaknesses, then overwhelms them with superior versions of their own strategies." "How do you fight an enemy that learns faster than you can adapt?" asked Commander Zix. "You don't give it anything to learn from," Webb replied. "True chaos cannot be studied or predicted, but achieving true chaos requires abandoning the rigid thinking that made your civilizations great." Dr. Yost understood first. "You're asking us to become something else, to stop being Kruven or Nexari or Zephyrian and become—" "What?" "Alive," Webb said simply. "The collective can consume civilizations, but it cannot consume life that refuses to be civilized." The task force members looked at each other with growing comprehension and horror. Webb was offering them survival, but at the gazier de cost of everything that defined their species and cultures. "There's more," Webb continued. "The collective isn't just randomly consuming the galaxy, it's working toward something specific. The humans who have been partially absorbed before escaping report that it's building toward a single massive event." "What kind of event?" Thelnara asked. "The creation of a permanent gateway between this galaxy and its home dimension. If the collective succeeds, it won't just harvest the galaxy. It will remake it as an extension of itself. No future chaos will be possible, because chaos itself will be consumed." The implications struck the Council representatives like physical blows. They weren't just fighting for their civilization's survival. They were fighting for the right of randomness and unpredictability to exist. "How much time do we have?" Commander Zix asked. Webb consulted displays that seemed to shift and change as he watched them. The collective needs to consume approximately 60% of galactic civilization to generate enough energy for the gateway. At current rates, that gives us 4 weeks. "What do you need from us?" Captain Thelnara asked. "Everything," Webb replied. "Your fleets, your people, your complete trust in methods that will seem insane, and most importantly, you need to spread the word to every surviving world. Surrender your need for order, or surrender your existence." The Void Collective had reached the galaxy's inner spiral, consuming entire sectors in days. Zephyr Prime had fallen. The Kruven homeworld was gone. Half the Nexari research facilities had been absorbed into the growing darkness. Only scattered fragments of the great civilizations remained, huddled around a few heavily defended core worlds. In the Council's emergency bunker on Galactic Central, the surviving leaders watched their universe die. 73% of galactic civilization has been consumed, reported the automated systems. Collective energy levels are approaching gateway threshold. General Thax's remaining forces had made their last stand at the Meridian defense line. The battle had lasted 6 hours. The collective hadn't even slowed down. "Where are the humans?" Thax demanded through his communicator. "They promised to help." Mind Speaker Ithara extended her consciousness as far as she dared. The psychic landscape of the galaxy was twisted, beyond recognition, full of absorbed minds singing in harmony with the collective's will. But at the very edge of her perception, she sensed something else. "They're coming," she whispered. But they're not alone. The first sign appeared on deep space sensors, gravitational distortions that made no sense. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace, but not from any direction that should be possible. They seemed to be emerging from the spaces between dimensions, from angles that existed but had no names. High Coordinator Zil-3 studied the incoming fleet through every available scanner. What he saw challenged every understanding of physics and military organization. Human ships flew alongside vessels from species that shouldn't exist. Crystalline entities that sang instead of using radio communications. Living ships that grew, new weapons as they fought. Mechanical beings that existed as pure information until they needed physical form. At the center of this impossible armada was Admiral Marcus Webb's flagship, but it had been transformed into something that hurt to look at directly. The ship existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its hull covered with symbols that moved and changed meaning as they were observed. "This is Admiral Webb to all surviving Council forces," came the transmission. "We're beginning our attack on the collective. Fair warning, our methods will seem insane. Do not try to understand them. Do not try to help using conventional tactics. Just stay out of our way and be ready to adapt." General Thak watched in disbelief as the human-led fleet approached the collective's main force. Instead of forming organized battle lines, the ships moved in patterns that seemed random. Some flew backward. Others spun wildly while firing in all directions. A few disappeared entirely, only to reappear behind collective vessels. "What are they doing?" Thackas muttered. The answer became clear as the battle began. The collective's ships, which had adapted to every conventional strategy, suddenly found themselves unable to predict or counter their enemies' movements. The human fleet fought like a jazz orchestra. No central conductor, but everyone somehow in harmony despite playing completely different songs. Collective vessels that had seemed invincible began taking damage. Not from superior weapons, but from attacks that shouldn't work. Human ships fired missiles that traveled through time, arriving before they were launched. Chaos remnant vessels used weapons that turned the collective's own defenses against themselves. But the most devastating attacks came from the modified humans themselves. Boarding parties that phased through solid matter. Marines whose battle plans changed randomly in the middle of combat. Pilots who flew by instinct rather than instruments, making split-second decisions that no computer could calculate. The collective's vast intelligence began experiencing something it had never encountered before. Confusion. Every time it analyzed the chaotic fleet's behavior, the patterns changed. Every adaptation it made was instantly obsolete. Impossible, transmitted the collective through captured vessels. Chaos cannot defeat order. Randomness cannot overcome intelligence. Admiral Webb's response came from ships that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. You're absolutely right. Chaos can't defeat order. But life isn't about defeating anything. It's about growing, changing, becoming something new. And that's something order can never do. The human fleet's next phase began. Instead of destroying collective ships, they started boarding them. But not to capture them, to heal them. The absorbed minds within collective vessels found their individuality slowly returning, as chaos infected the entity's perfect unity. Species that had been consumed decades earlier began remembering who they were. Collective ship crews started making independent decisions. The entity's monolithic intelligence began fragmenting as billions of individual thoughts reasserted themselves. "The gateway!" Mind Speaker Yathara suddenly screamed. "It's still building the gateway." Even as its fleet fell to chaos, the collective was using its accumulated energy to tear open a permanent rift between dimensions. On the far side, vast, shapes moved in the darkness, more collectives waiting to pour through. "Webb," General Tax transmitted. "The gateway will open in minutes. If more of those things get through, we know." Webb replied calmly. "Trust the chaos." What happened next would be studied by xenobiologists for centuries. The human fleet, instead of trying to stop the gateway, flew directly into it. Ships that had been modified to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously entered the collective's home realm. But they didn't go as conquerors. They went as teachers. The space between galaxies was filled with collective entities, vast intelligences, that had consumed countless civilizations across the universe. They had existed in perfect order for billions of years, growing larger and more intelligent with each harvest. The humans brought them a gift they had never imagined, the possibility of change. Chaos spread through the realm like a beautiful infection. Collective entities that had been identical for eons began developing individual personalities. Perfect order gave way to creative disorder. The hive minds that had consumed galaxies started experiencing the joy of independent thought. "What have you done to us?" the original collective demanded. "Set you free," Admiral Webb replied. "You spent so long consuming other forms of life that you forgot how to live yourselves." The transformation was not instant or complete. Many collective entities resisted the change, clinging to their ordered existence. But enough embraced chaos to tip the balance. The home realm began experiencing its first civil war in billions of years. Back in the galaxy, the local collective's ships found their connection to the hive mind severing. Individual consciousness returned to billions of absorbed beings. Ships that had been extensions of a single will became communities of diverse minds working together. The gateway began destabilizing as the entities on the far side fought among themselves. Some wanted to continue the harvest. Others wanted to explore this new concept of individual existence. The resulting disagreement made stable portal maintenance impossible. With a sound like reality tearing, the gateway collapsed. General Tax stared at his tactical displays in amazement. Across the galaxy, collective ships were broadcasting surrender signals, not because they had been defeated, but because they had been liberated. "It's over," he whispered. But Admiral Webb had one more message for the surviving council members. "The collective is gone, but the galaxy they left behind is broken. Your old civilizations are mostly consumed. Your rigid hierarchies are destroyed. Your perfect order is chaos." Webb's image appeared on screens throughout the remaining council territories. He looked older, changed by his journey into the spaces between dimensions. But his eyes held something that had been missing from galactic civilization for millennia: hope. "This is humanity's judgment on the galaxy," Webb continued. "Not punishment, but opportunity. You can try to rebuild the old ways, recreate the hierarchies that made you feel safe. But if you do, the next harvest will find you just as easily." "What do you suggest?" asked High Coordinator Zil 3. "Learn to dance instead of marching," Webb replied. Embrace the chaos that makes life possible. Build societies that change and grow instead of societies that merely endure. The transformation took years. Species that had defined themselves through rigid cultural roles learned to be flexible. Governments that had maintained power through control learned to guide through inspiration. Technologies that had prioritized efficiency learned to value creativity. It wasn't easy. Many beings struggled with the loss of the certainties that had defined their existence. But slowly, a new kind of galactic civilization emerged. One that celebrated differences instead of suppressing them. One that saw chaos not as a problem to be solved, but as the source of all growth and beauty. Humanity took its place not as the galaxy's rulers, but as its gardeners. They helped other species learn to adapt, to change, to find strength in unpredictability. They established schools that taught chaos theory alongside mathematics, art programs that encouraged creative disorder, and diplomatic academies that specialized in beautiful confusion. The former council members adapted in their own ways. General Thax learned to lead through inspiration rather than intimidation. Logic Executor Vex 12, his consciousness still partly touched by collective intelligence, became a bridge between order and chaos. Mind Speaker Withara founded a new form of meditation that embraced mental,